those experiences are how we feel about that moment, how we feel about our partner, and more importantly, the context of stress that we are under at that time. So I want to turn now to kind of how we define sources of stress. Now, do any of you ever experience stress?
Always.
Yeah. If you didn't, the reason why I asked this question is that you told me I never experienced stress. I would want to be your best friend to learn what is going on in your life that you never experienced stress, because stress is inevitable, right? Just like conflict. So one of the things that we have looked at in terms of, did I skip, am I skipping slides here?
No.
No, it's okay.
Okay, is that one of the things is that we can think about different areas of stress. And this is actually an example from the education program, the relationship education program that we have tailored to understand where stress may come up. Okay? So these are what we consider common stressors, okay? Whether it be with your partner, within your household or with your family, children, which was mentioned, family, work, social relationships, our free time, finances, or other. What I want you to think about is if you were to draw this graph and kind of shade in, where would you have your bars kind of go, right? So maybe some of you would say, you know what, I have a lot of financial stress. I don't have much stress when it comes to free time or how to spend my time. I maybe have moderate amount of stress with my social relationships. And you can imagine then how we would fill out this graph. What's important about this is that we recognize is that all of these different areas of stress, we may not think about. We may just think about, I'm stressed. But what happens when we give this actual sheet to participants in the program and couples, what we find is that couples have not even thought about, or partners have not even thought about where their different aspects of stress are originating and where they are coming from. And when you fill this out, we call this the Stress Manhattan, because it was developed by my colleague and mentor, Guy Bodeman at the University of Zurich in Switzerland. And he actually did work with John Gottman, who I just mentioned. And when you fill this out, it starts to look like a skyscraper or Manhattan in New York. And so that's why it's called the Stress Manhattan. So think about this and think about where your aspects of stress may be located. Now, importantly, is that we think about stress and we may say, I'm stressed, okay? And this is what I'm experiencing. I'm experiencing some elements of negative affect, maybe frustration, anger, etc. But we're not necessarily sure how we have a common language to understand stress in the context of our social relationships. So one of the things, you're fine. You're good. One of the things that my colleague and I did many years ago, even though I'm only 21, it's amazing, that we did in 2007 was we took the literature that was published and we tried to understand, is there a way that we can offer a typology or a way to organize the concepts of stress from a relational component, meaning within the context of those social relationships. So we analyzed the literature and developed what we would consider stress as a relational construct. This is something that we published in 2007, which has since been updated based on additional literature. But essentially is that we can define stress on 3 dimensions. The first being the locus. Where does this stress come from? Does this stress come from outside of my relationship, which would be the elements of if I'm stressed at work, that has nothing to do with my partner. Okay? Unless I work with my partner and it's a different context. But I am stressed because of school. Okay, maybe my partner is not in school. I'm stressed because of my friends. Has nothing to do with my partner. Okay? So that's external, outside the relationship. There's also stress that comes inside the relationship or internal stress. Those stressors may be difficult partner behaviors, differing goals that you have to have children, to not have children. Should we stay together? Should we not stay together? Right? All of these things that happen within the relationship. Okay? So does that make sense so far? We have external stress and internal stress, because there's going to be a game shortly. So I need to make sure that you understand this. Very good. Then we have the intensity. I put this here because some of you may have heard about a rumor around campus about a stress that happened that some of you thought was major, but it was actually quite minor with the horse. Mm-hmm. You haven't heard about it, I'll tell you later because this is being recorded. So minor stressors are those that happen every day. These are our daily hassles. Being stuck in traffic, missing a meeting, getting ready for a presentation and having technology not work out. All of these, yeah, this is great. Yes, we love participation. If these apply to you, just feel free. Like, yes, me, of course. Minor things. Okay. On the other side, we have major stressors. Unemployment, having to change jobs, a family member being diagnosed with a critical illness. Whatever you can think about, right, in the context of really things that impact you. And the duration. Are these short, maybe within a week span? Or are they more chronic? Do they happen up to like 12 years? Or rather 12 months, I'm sorry. So are these more long-term stressors? Now, what we found are the types of stressors that have the most negative impact on your relationship quality and your relationship satisfaction. Okay. So I'm going to ask you, if I experience stress that has the most negative impact on my relationship quality and my relationship satisfaction, if you can, I would like you to raise your hand. Do you think these are stress? I'm going to go over the two again. So remember, stress outside of our relationship, stress inside our relationship. How many of you, and go ahead and raise your hand, think that it is stress inside my relationship? The things that impact how satisfied I am and the quality of my relationship is because of stress that happens with my partner. Annoying habits, differing goals, etc. How many of you think that? A couple of you? Okay. All right, and then for the rest of you, I'm assuming you're going to say, no, I think it's stress that happens outside my relationship. Inside? Adentro? Right? So inside the relationship. Okay, inside the relationship. So many of you think that it's stress inside the relationship that causes the most negative impacts for our relationship quality and our relationship satisfaction. I will say, thank you for participating. You're actually incorrect. It is the stress that happens outside of our relationship that has nothing to do with our partner that impacts our relationship quality and our relationship well-being. And it's the stress that is minor. Our everyday hassles that have nothing to do with our romantic partner are the ones that impact our relationship the most. I'm seeing your professor here. Very puzzled by this, and I'll explain why. So there's a couple of things as to why this is the case. Okay, so if we think about ourselves as individuals, we know that we are social beings. We have a fundamental need to belong within our relationships, within our communities, within society. Stress can impact how it is that we interact with others in two different ways. And I'm going to share this with you, and then I'm going to go into greater detail about this when I talk about the relationship education program, about how we teach couples about that. But the one way that stress can impact your relationship is by spilling over into our relationship. So if you have a bad day at school, a bad day at work, and you come home and you don't want to talk to your partner, you can't make the dinner that you said that you were going to because you have work to do, that is stress spilling over from yourself into your relationship. In addition, that negative experience of stress can actually cross over to your partner. Have any of you, and maybe even talked with a friend, you're having a great day. Like you have just attended your favorite university classes, which always makes everyone excited, right? Yes, yes. Yes, we love school, we love studying. So yes, you have a great day and you come home or you maybe interact with a friend and they're having a bad day. Do you start to kind of feel those negative emotions? You're like, oh, I guess my day, it was good, but I feel bad for my friend. I feel bad for my partner. That's the stress crossover. And we've shown in other studies, not what I'm presenting here, but the idea of what we call interpersonal, meaning within people, interpersonal emotion dynamics. So how our emotions with our partners are connected. So all of this together is some background information for you to understand how we think about stress in the context of relationships. So one of the things that my colleague and dear friend Casey Totenhagen, who's at the University of Alabama, and I did, is we wanted to do a study on understanding stress. However, we recognize that stress can be very general for people. I just showed you some common stressors, yet because of different identities that we have, some people may have a greater propensity or a greater, experience of stress because of the identities that they hold. So as an example, are any of you students that were not originally from Quito? Any of you not from Quito or maybe coming to the university from another city, another country? Yes. Couple of you, okay. Or if you may have, right, a differing like minority identity. Okay, so maybe you are not part of whatever majority culture could be experienced. In those cases, you may actually be predisposed to stress because of the minority identity that you're holding in a majority context. And so with that, we wanted to really understand how partners who are in a relationship with someone of the same gender would experience stress and the implications that that had on those individuals. So we started with what we consider the S3 study. So we likely in science, you've come across this. We love acronyms because a lot of the times we want to come up with really fun, great ideas, and then it's easier for us to just label these. So this was considered the same sex stress study, S3. Oops, excuse me. So you will notice maybe some older citations here, with older meaning more than 10 years ago, that we have done because this study was actually conducted in 2013. And you're going to see from 2013 to present how we have brought this literature together. So one of the things that we know is that individuals who identify as lesbian, gay, or bisexual actually have a higher rate or experience higher rates of psychological distress and relationship disparities compared to heterosexual individuals who are in a relationship. And risks for depression and anxiety are 1.5 to 2.5 times higher compared to heterosexual individuals. Meaning, if you identify as a member of this community, you actually experience greater stress. We also see higher rates of relationship dissolution, meaning higher breakups, higher relationship cycling, meaning they're together, they're not together, they're together, they're not together. And it has nothing to do about the individuals. It has nothing to do about the relationship. Again, think external. It has to do with the stress that happens outside the relationship that comes in. Now, we know that and continued work that I've done is that attitudes towards same gender couples not only differ certainly across the US, they absolutely differ across the world as well and in different cultural contexts. And at this time, when we did this study, I'm coming from Arizona, my colleagues in Alabama, we thought maybe we would see differences based on the different states that we live in. I'm in the Southwest, Casey's in the Southeast, much more conservative in the Southeast as compared to the Southwest. So that's why we added this context to understand the social context to which stress occurs. Now, with any good, science, I think it's very important to rely on theories and frameworks because it helps you get a lens, so to speak, of how people are viewing stressors. Or rather, not stressors, but rather the science that they're conducting. And for us, it was the vulnerability stress adaptation model, or the VSA model for short. What this model shows is that some of us have vulnerabilities that predispose us to experiencing stress. Oftentimes, what has been looked at with this model by Carney and Bradbury is looked at maybe problematic personality traits. So individuals that are high in neuroticism or individuals that tend to ruminate a lot tend to experience stress at much higher rates than those who do not. Individuals that come from lower socioeconomic statuses, have lower incomes, are predisposed to higher rates of stress as well. So those vulnerabilities impact how much stress we have, and it impacts how much we can actually cope with these stressors. And if we don't have the ability to cope with these stressors, they can absolutely impact the quality of our relationship and how much our relationship is stable over time. Now, what has been shown with this model to date, up to this study, was that we looked at enduring vulnerabilities. So things that were really, outside the context, well, both inside the context of personality traits and outside as it pertained to socioeconomic status. What we didn't look at yet, and one of the things that we wanted to test, was to expand the theory to say we also think that these enduring vulnerabilities of having a minority identity can actually make people experience negative stressors and then impact their relationship. So, as I mentioned to you before, we also looked at how stress can impact the relationship. So you saw one model before, and we're also relying on this other model as well. Because if we go back, excuse me, this is just saying stress. Now we learned that stress can be outside the relationship and inside the relationship. This in no way makes the differentiation. So we relied on another model, the stress divorce model, to look at how does stress impact the relationship truly. This model suggests that we have these stressors that happen outside of our relationship. This stress then impacts how we communicate with our partner. So think about this. If you have a stressful day, do you feel as though that you then have time, or you have a stressful week, whatever it may be, do you feel that you have time to spend with friends, family, your romantic partner? No. No, absolutely not, right? You have things to do. You're like, I have all this to do. I don't have time to spend with you. I can't come to that dinner. I can't go to the party. Okay. What happens is that we also have what we would consider decreased, right, constructive communication, meaning we're not communicating clearly or with I statements, which has been shown to be beneficial, is that we start to say, I'm stressed, leave me be, I've got things to do, or however it is that you say that. And you start to then see over time, mutual alienation. If I'm not the stress partner in this context, you're always stressed. I'm always hearing about your bad day, right? I don't even see why we're together. Why are we together? You're stressed. I'm upset. You're upset. Mutual alienation. If then we have continued mutual alienation, breakups. I love the recognition That's good. Everyone's like smiling, like, yeah, it's not good that people break up, but it's good. No, yeah, good. Thank you. So what we have here, almost invisible, right, on our x-axis, for those of you that love statistics and graphs, is that on this invisible x-axis, we have time. And that's really what happens here. Okay? So again, we know that stress can impact our relationship quality. It can impact how we feel about our partner, and ultimately can impact whether or not we stay together. So because I'm I try to be a very happy person and a positive person, and I approach things from a strength-based perspective, meaning I try to look at things about how we can help, is that we focus here. We recognize that stress happens. Okay? And we recognize that likely we can create interventions here that can help partners to say, you may experience these stressors, but how can we help so that you don't start going across this pattern? Okay. And any of you figure out how to move this arrow here so we don't experience stress, call me, we'll do lunch. We'll be like the greatest scientists of the world, apart from Hans here, who is Ortiz 2.0. So with these models in mind, we had two goals of this study. Okay? The first was to say, we've looked at enduring vulnerabilities in the context of relationships with personality, as well as maybe socioeconomic status, but we haven't looked at it a specific population that may be experiencing higher rates of stress. So are there enduring vulnerabilities, traits that make me even more experience stress because of not being out, right? We're considering sexual minority individuals, so individuals who identify as lesbian, gay, or bisexual. Are they not out? And do they have negative feelings about their sexual orientation because of their majority status or living in a majority culture? So we wanted to look at, can we actually expand the theory? The second part was that, can we then look at and identify ways in which we can have partners cope with these stressors and buffer, or rather kind of prevent almost, the negative outcomes that they may experience. You all with me so far? Any questions so far? No? Okay. So how did we do this? So we actually had community samples from same-sex couples recruited from 2 regions in the United States. I mentioned Southwest Arizona, Southeast Alabama. We distributed flyers to LGBT organizations in the community, and we also asked the universities to distribute the information about the study to different organizations that they may be affiliated with. Both participants had to, recruited couples, okay, so both partners had to be adults. Interestingly, in Arizona, the age of adulthood is 18, the age of adulthood in Alabama is 19. I don't live in Alabama, I cannot tell you why this is, but nothing really makes sense in the US anymore. So just know that we have different ages. And they had to be in a romantic relationship for at least 2 months. The reason why we said 2 months is because how many of you have heard of attachment theory? Or the idea of how we're connected with our caregivers and our romantic partners? No? No. This is so exciting, y'all. Okay, that's a whole nother day, a whole nother talk, but essentially it's that how our early experiences with our parents and caregivers impact how we experience our relationship with them. And so we use 2 months because oftentimes that's the time that we know that we've established a bond with our partner. And so that's why we use 2 months, because that's when the attachment formations happen. This study was actually, so we had both partners, we gave a baseline survey, and then they did 14 days of daily diaries. So we did a longitudinal design with both partners across this time period, and they were compensated up to $30 US per person for their participation. In total, we had 95 couples participate. We had 53 couples from Arizona, 42 couples from the Southeast. You can see that we had a range in age across both of the samples, 18 to 61 in Arizona, 21 to 55 in Alabama. Quite a range in terms of relationship length. We had a majority white individuals in both samples, as well as a majority of women participants in both samples. For those of you that are getting so excited about understanding and studying social relationships, it is not surprising that when we look at the context of who participates in research, is that it's usually the women. And in the case of couples where one person identifies as a woman, the other person identifies as a man, it's usually the woman that's dragging the male partner into the lab to say, let's participate in science. This is a great idea. Okay? So this is not surprising. So remember our first question. Our first question was, can we expand theory? Okay? Can we actually demonstrate that there are enduring vulnerabilities apart from those that have already been studied? In this context, if I am not out to my community, to my family, my friends, whomever it may be, and if I have negative experiences about my identity, does that then cause me to have greater experiences of stress? And if so, how does that stress impact my relationship? So what we found in this paper here is that on days when we had high stress, and we also had we reported high negative feelings about our identity, we reported greater conflict in our relationship. So again, thinking about the model, I'm stressed. Well, first of all, right, here's my identity, right, my level of identity. So I'm having enduring vulnerabilities, feeling not good about myself. It also causes me to experience high levels of stress on that day. And on those days, we're reporting higher conflict. Thumbs up, not because it's good that you experience stress, and because that you experience conflict, it's in support of our hypothesis. The other thing is that we also find similar effects for relationship quality. When I have higher, negative experiences about my identity, and I'm also experiencing high stress, my relationship quality has decreased. So we found support for this theoretical model and expanding that it's also applicable to those who may experience identity because of their sexual orientation. In addition, in another paper that we looked at of testing our second hypothesis, is there anything that we can do, or are there elements of the relationship that we can then use to buffer, okay, or moderate some of these effects? And the answer was clear in this paper, where we looked at on days with high discrimination, or when people reported high discrimination, and they actually reported low coping, meaning low empathy from one's partner after they communicated that, they also reported higher rates of depression. Now, all of this together, and coming together, and this was a study that we did, like I said, 10 years ago, is that what this showed and what science showed and how we kind of put this together in a translational sense is that we collected this pilot data to show, listen, we have evidence from couples to say these couples, meaning those that are in same gender relationships, have higher experiences of stress. We know that those higher experiences of stress lead to both individual, meaning symptoms of depression, as well as negative relational outcomes, right? We saw lower relationship quality, higher relationship conflict. However, we know that there's something that we can do to then help prevent these couples from experiencing this stress, which is where kind of my area of work lies, and how our intersection of team comes together, is that there's things that we can do to help individuals, to help couples actually stop experiencing, or rather buffer these negative experiences. So taking this pilot data, we wanted to then go to the literature to say, well, what already exists? What exists that we know that we could potentially help couples in this context? So we went to the literature. What exists for this group? We found 3 empirically supported interventions. Now, there is a difference between intervention and prevention. Where we lie is at the preventative stage, meaning we know that people are experiencing stress, but we don't want to see couples when they're absolutely ready to break up. We want to give them the tools to be successful in their relationship before. Okay? Nothing existed on the preventative side. What we did see across these are different relationship interventions that existed, that took existing interventions, modified them a tad to be applicable for this population, and then tested those. All have been empirically supported, meaning we have this within the science, we've shown the beneficial outcomes, but a lot of them have focused on really like treating clinically depressive symptoms or clinical levels of depression, anxiety, conflict, etc. So we thought, we have the pilot data, we see a gap, what can we do about it? So that is when we created, or rather redesigned, the Couples Coping Enhancement Training, Sexual Minority Stress, or CCT-SMS for short. We did this project in a couple of different phases. Both were funded by the Mental Research Institute. And we had to do this in a couple of phases because one, we had to take the existing program, which I'll tell you about, translate it, develop an a measurement that was empirically sound, then use in the actual program, and then we ran the program to test whether or not it was efficacious in our results. So the original Couples Coping Enhancement Training Program is a relationship education program that was developed, again, by my colleague and mentor, Guy Bodeman at the University of Zurich in Switzerland. It looks at, in the context of, we know that stress exists, and stress exists outside the relationship. And so we can then teach couples how to actually cope together or dyadically cope with one's partner. And I'll explain what I mean by that in just a second. But the existing program, even when I was talking with Guy, I said, is this program applicable for same-gender couples? Of course, it's good for everybody. Okay. It's the same conversations that I've been having with colleagues this week, is that if one thing works in one culture, is that truly applicable in another culture without understanding the culture that you'd like to apply that in? And I see some head nods. No, you're absolutely right. And we can't just say because it works for one, it's got to work for something else. Okay. So we knew then, by looking at the program, which was originally in German, I do not speak German, the German program was translated in English. Then we looked at the English program, first edited the English, and then looked at the English program, and we realized that it wasn't culturally sensitive enough to use with same-gender couples. Meaning, if we just took the program and applied it, we can actually be causing more harm to the individuals than the benefits, even though it's been shown to be effective. So there was no focus on what we would consider sexual minority stressors. So I had mentioned to you, because of differing identities, people experience stress. Individuals who identify, we use the term BIPOC, maybe some of you have been, maybe some of you have come across this term, but Black, Indigenous, people of color. Those individuals living in predominantly white societies have higher experiences of stress because of their minoritized identity. So in this context, there was no focus on stressors that sexual minority individuals faced. Discrimination, lack of family support, lack of healthcare resources, etc. The case examples, images and videos were all reflective of, if you looked at them, heterosexual couples that were very homogenous, meaning the same groups of people, same racial backgrounds, etc. So we also saw a gap here. So what we wanted to do was actually then look at how we could take the existing program and tailor it to the population. So here was our goal. Okay, our goal was to first. Yes.
Can I ask?
Yes, please. Go ahead.
You are saying that this test doesn't apply maybe to, from German to Americans. Does exist maybe a difference between ages?
Excellent question. There has been across the research and across the randomized clinical trials that were run with this program, we saw similar effects across different age groups. So there was no difference in terms of age or relationship length in terms of the
In terms of, women relationship or guys, like same sex.
Yes, so I'll get there, but we do know from the research though that for heterosexual or couples that are in heterosexual relationships, or if you identify as heterosexual, meaning self-identified men, self-identified women, we know that actually women are better copers under stress than men. Sorry, guys, but a little rough. All right. So, yes, great question. So what we wanted to do is that we said, okay, in order to really advance this program, there's a couple of steps that we have to follow. First, we have to revise the materials. Yes, they're in English, but I just said we didn't have good examples. We didn't have the language to be able to use to then deliver. So we had to revise the materials. The second thing that we had to do was to develop a measure that was sensitive enough to identify how people coped with stressors specific to their sexual minority identity. Because if we just gave a general measure of stress, if I ask you, are you stressed? What are you stressed about? Maybe some of you are thinking about, I'm stressed about an exam. I'm stressed about a party that I have to go to. I'm stressed about anything. Anyone stressed here? Hopefully no. It's all about coping. Are you stressed?
I'm stressed.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I'm stressed about I don't know. I'm stressed. A couple of weeks ago, I think, but I think it's from my medication,
Okay.
but it's I think I try to stay stable.
Excellent. Okay, and I'm sorry, what's your name?
Irina.
Irina. Okay, so thank you, Irina, for sharing that, because that was important, right? Did you hear me say anything about, okay, maybe I'm going, taking new medication, I'm feeling stressed about that? No. So all of us are thinking about something very different when I ask you the context of what are you stressed about. So in this measure, we wanted to make sure that when we gave participants the questionnaire, that we said, tell us how you cope and how you communicate about stress related to your sexual minority identity. So that's what the dyadic coping inventory, sexual minority stress, see, we love acronyms. We had to evaluate that to make sure that it was empirically sound. We then took all of these materials and we created an expert panel review. And I'll show you who those individuals are in just a second. And then we wanted to pilot test the intervention in the Phoenix area. Okay. So imagine, can you believe I'm only 20 and we've done all this work in the past 10 years? Pretty good, huh? Yeah.
Yeah.
Always wear your sunscreen. Okay, so expert panel members, and here's our lovely folks. This is Dr. Keith Oderman, my colleague and mentor, and he's the original creator of the couples coping enhancement training. We have Carissa Grieving, Dr. Carissa Grieving, who is a licensed marriage and family therapist at Arizona State University. She is also the clinic director of the Arizona Marriage and Family Therapy Clinic. And then we had Dr. Sharon Rostowski, who's at the University of Kentucky, who has expertise in same-gender couples. I share this with you because as you are thinking about your research projects, and as exemplified by even this week of all of us coming together, is that bringing a team of experts together that have different perspectives can really open your mind to science. It can open your mind to thinking about things differently. We have someone who's very research focused and we have someone who's very clinically focused to look at the materials to say, have you thought about this? No, we haven't. That's a great idea. How can we pull that together? And of course, we had the original developer to ensure that we were meeting all the criteria for the program. So I'm happy to report that one, we completed revising the materials. We also ran the evaluation of the measure, which was then published in 2023. We had all of our colleagues review this information, and we also completed pilot testing in the Phoenix metro area. Now, some of you may say, this is interesting. You had 10, if you're really paying attention. You had 10 on the last slide, but you have 9 here, and that's right. Because some of the things that we were looking at when you're testing interventions is the work feasible? What we found, and I'll show you in some of the data, is that it really wasn't feasible to do the workshop as we had intended in the community, and I'll share why. Is it acceptable? Meaning, do participants find that it's actually working? Do providers think that it's actually going to be beneficial? And of course, is it effective in reducing individual experiences of stress and couple level stress? So in terms of the program itself, remember I told you that every good research idea has to come, at least from the social sciences, has to come from a theoretical perspective, a model, a framework, a background, so that you can understand the lens to which we are looking at different constructs. So we knew that these programs were theoretically grounded in what we would consider the systemic transactional model. Essentially, what that means is that I shared with you all that our experiences between ourselves and our partners are connected. We know that we're a system. When I'm experiencing something, my partner is also experiencing something. And so in order for partners to cope, they have to communicate that stress verbally and then learn how to cope together. So that's essentially the model here. And so as I noted here, the dyadic coping refers to the partner's abilities to verbally communicate their stress to their partner, who then can respond in a positive manner or a negative manner. We focused, of course, on teaching couples how to communicate positively in the context of their relationship. Now, a little tidbit is that, let me ask you, how much of our communication is verbal?
Huh?
What percentage of our communication, when we say, I told you, you should have known, how much do we actually verbally communicate? 20%? 20%?
I think our communication is like 50-50.
50-50.
Because our moves and our our
Gestures?
gestures and our I don't know how to say it, but
Connected.
the connection that you have to
Very
the person, you can also talk to the person like the verbal communication is also very important, and it is so significant, and I think it's 50-50 to the gestures and verbal.
Okay, so 50, so we've got 20%, we have 50%. Did I hear you say 10%?
Then.
Yeah, you said 10, right?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. The person made, okay, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to put you on the spot. Okay, 10%. Do we have any other guesses?
I can say that verbally is 100% and non-verbally 100%.
Okay, so we have someone who would like to challenge everything that I have said.
As usual.
Yes, that's good. I love it. I love it. Okay, that's interesting. We're gonna chat over dinner. So we have 100%, 10%, 20%, and 50%. None of you, perhaps my colleague back here, none of you are correct. We rely predominantly on nonverbal communication. Upwards of 93% of our communication is nonverbal. 93%. So when you come home and you are stressed, arms crossed, your eyes are rolling, you're not talking, you're communicating. You may think you're not communicating, but you're communicating. 93%. That means 7% is what we are potentially verbally communicating. And where do couples fail, so to speak, is they rely on nonverbal communication and they do not verbally express, if they have the ability to do so, how it is that they are experiencing that stress. And that's why we teach couples, you have to verbally communicate what's going on. 93%. So remember that too, when you are in class and your professors ask you questions, be like, 7%, I should answer this question for my professor. That was a bad joke in English, but okay, we'll keep going. All right, so in terms of the program, okay, what does this program look like? You're saying, okay, you want to teach couples how to cope with stress. Well, what does this look like? First, we wanted to teach them and give them theoretical explanation. We didn't want to just bring people together and say, hey, stress happens. We know that. No, but it's been demonstrated in the literature and we have theories to explain this. We also gave couples the opportunities to self-reflect. Remember when I showed you very early on in the talk that stress Manhattan? Where are my different stressors happening? We have couples do that. And then they share with their partner, here are my stressors. And you know what happens? A lot of the partners say, I had no idea. I didn't know that that was an aspect of stress that was impacting you. How do we, partner and myself, handle stress in our relationship? Do we communicate about this verbally? Do we communicate about this non-verbally? Another fun, fact for you, or rather trivia question, is that it's really interesting. Listen to your friends that are in relationships. When they talk about their partner, do they say I and them, or me and you, or do they say we? The use of we actually shows that you are an interdependent unit. And actually it has been shown that the more couples think about themselves as a we or a system, the more beneficial effects it has for your individual health, disease recovery, as well as your relationship quality. So this is also fun when you're like on the bus, on the tram, and you're like maybe listening to people's conversations and you hear them talking.
You said disease recovery?
Correct. Yeah.
Do you know any data about this?
Yes, absolutely. So no, to answer your question, so Janet Kiko Glazer at Ohio State University has done a lot in terms of understanding the impact of relationships on disease recovery. And even so much that, if you get I was telling friends and colleagues earlier, is that if you actually get a cut, they looked at, if you have a good quality relationship, your wounds heal faster than they do if you don't have a high quality relationship. Relationships are so important. Okay, coach communication exercises. So we also have people, and we actually have individuals in a relationship come. I'm a trained facilitator. I trained those in my lab. We had couples come together. They sat, and we actually coached them on how to communicate about the stressors. Yes.
I quite don't understand, because if we only communicate 7%, you're improving that 7% or increasing 7%.
Great question. I wish we could increase the 7%, but we're trying to improve the 7%. Yeah, or maybe improve the quality of the 7%, but rather we're trying to get people to talk.
Yeah.
We can all think about this. Dory, I see you. We all think about this. When your friends or your family members come and they say, I'm stressed, oftentimes we don't stop to ask, well, how can I help you? How can I support you? We say, don't worry about it. Oh my gosh, do this. Don't do this. And we assume that we know what they want, which is always incorrect. Asking people, how can I help you in this situation? Need to vent? Then vent. Need me to help you problem solve? Then help them problem solve. Yes. Pregunta. You're just stretching? No. You had a question. Okay, well, good stretching techniques. Very good. Okay. So besides the theory, we then have them reflect. Okay, we reflect individually and we also have them reflect with their partner. We teach them how to communicate. And then we give them homework. See, even when you are done out of school, there's always homework in life. Isn't that exciting?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, they're all like, no. Okay, sorry for the bad news. Oh, let me go back. So this is what the program looks like. It's a 5-module program. Okay. What we did is we recruited couples. I'm standing here so you don't read. You don't just jump ahead with your excitement. So we had a 5-module program. It happened over 2 days, on a Saturday and a Sunday. The Saturday was 10 to 5, and Sunday was about 10 to 4 or 5. We broke this up though by first teaching couples about stress and coping. We wanted the goal of module 1 was to increase, how do I experience stress? How does my partner experience stress? And can we differentiate between non-verbally, here's what goes on when I'm experiencing stress. I shut off, I close my arms, I shut down. Verbally, which we know is both paraverbal and verbal, which I know Professor Hans had talked about earlier this week. So verbally, right, we can communicate our stress, but my voice pitch can be very different. Right? Because I'm really stressed. Oh, I don't know what to do. Very different than me saying, oh my gosh, I'm stressed. Woo! Right? Very different. Different reactions. So then we also teach the couples, just as I taught you, how stress impacts our relationships. So they learn about this. And with each goal, we also have methods to increase the learning. We taught them psychoeducation and self-reflective exercises. Once they understood the basis that stress is not just within themselves, but it's a relational construct, we tried to enhance how they would cope with their partner. We taught them about stress communication. How can you talk to your partner about stress? How can you improve your skills? And this is when we started to then show them video examples and really think about how do we communicate about stress to our partner? Now, here's what I'm going to ask you to remember. What were the stressors that had the biggest impact on our relationship? Were those external stressors or were those internal stressors? External stressors, great. So the stress that happens outside my relationship has nothing to do with my partner. That's where we start. We have them start talking about stress outside the relationship. Then we move into how can you talk about stress within your relationship to your partner? Why do you think we start with stress outside the relationship when we're teaching couples these skills?
Like you said before, it's the biggest.
Okay, maybe one theory, right? Maybe because it's the biggest stressor that impacts our relationship. Maybe.
Because it's external, it's easier.
Aha. Yes, because guess what happens if we started with, let's talk about why your partner is annoying. Let's talk about their annoying habits. We probably would lose some participants. Yes, you're still annoying, even though I can communicate about how annoying you are, you're still annoying, right? Yes. you have a question? Are you stretching too? Okay, we have the stretching corner in the back. If any of you would like to do that, my apologies. If you have any questions, though, speak to that. So yes, we teach couples.
No, she was
Oh,
first.
you were, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. Please.
So if I have a full family, it's more difficult, 6 months learning stuff than if we have a couple.
Interesting. And may I ask you, like, and with what you feel comfortable sharing, like, why might that be the case? I'm just curious, right? Because like, why, from your perspective, do you think it's easier to talk about things about that person or with that person than things that don't have to do with them?
My case.
No, sure.
Being, partners can have confidence.
Okay. Okay, very good. Very interesting perspective, and I appreciate you sharing that. Yeah, very good. No, I love that. Everyone has their own perspectives, and that's wonderful that you shared that. So think about this, okay? So maybe, right, when we do start with things outside the relationship, because we then go to inside the relationship. Do you all remember how I introduced you to John Gottman? Well, not literally, but figuratively speaking on the slide. Is that, remember, John Gottman can predict with up to 90% accuracy the couples that are going to break up or get divorced based on just watching a video interaction. Now, before my colleagues ask, do I do this like when I'm walking and I see potential couples walking and I'm like, I think they're going to break up? No, I don't, because I have other things to think about. However, there are what we would consider the 4 horsemen, or what John Gottman considers the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. These are the 4 negative behaviors that predict divorce or predict breakups. So when we are teaching the couples about stress in their relationship, we teach them about the skills and the behaviors that they should not do, because it can cause even greater stress and greater impacts of relationship dissolution. So I'm going to actually teach you those 4 behaviors now, because this is what we teach the couples. We show them video examples, and then we have them practice about how they can communicate about stress to their partner. So the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. Do any of you, well, actually, no one in this room I know engages in any of these behaviors, okay? Because we're all angels, right?
Yeah.
All of us are angels, okay? No diablos.
No.
Okay, so number 1, how, like, criticism. Okay, if you are critical of your partner, bad. Okay, you never do this right. You're always stressed. You can never blah, blah, blah. Hypothetically, which means that it happens in my house, as I'm like, is there a reason why when you open the cabinet, we can't close the cabinet? This is very puzzling to me. It's just like, I'm so confused by that. But yes, and of course I'm an angel, so that's why I'm giving you an example. So yes, like criticism, bad. Contempt. If you start to harbor negative feelings about your partner, and imagine like a soda bottle and you just say, I'm not going to say anything, I'm not going to say anything. And then you just get really upset. And then you start being really just mean and contemptuous to your partner, bad. Okay. So we have contempt, criticism, defensiveness. Ooh. Let's say someone says to you, you do this. Oh, really? Well, do you know what you did? You did. Da, 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 da. Okay. Defensiveness, not good. Okay. We cannot be defensive. And the 4th behavior is stonewalling. Now, what we find in the literature is that men are bigger stonewallers than women because of their cardiovascular activity, they actually start to get hyper aroused more than women in the context of interactions, and their blood pressure is, like spikes. And so we stonewall. What that means? Like imagine I'm communicating with you and you're talking to me and I'm just like this. And then you say, did you hear me? No response. They walk in the other room. Right? They ice you. Stonewalling. All what I would consider bad news bears, which I think is a reference to a very old American movie way before my time. But anyway, they're not good. Okay, so criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. Okay. And remember, it's important that we recognize that one person cannot not communicate, meaning you are always communicating with those who you are interacting with. So if you are stonewalling and you're thinking, I'm not going to say anything, I'm going to go in the other room. What are you communicating to your partner?
You don't care.
You don't care. You're not important. Doesn't matter to me. Okay. But we're all angels, remember, so we don't do any of these behaviors. All right, so, and then what's not good is if you are a relational scientist like myself and your partner maybe responds to you, you should never say that's actually an example of defensiveness and that's actually been shown to predict relationship dissolution, so you shouldn't probably do that behavior. Just kidding, I never. But it's always good to have empirically supported examples. So we teach couples about stress and coping. We teach them how to communicate the stress outside the relationship, inside the relationship. We also teach them about fairness and equity. How do we have a balanced relationship? Now, this is the one that I would actually like to pause on, because I think that this, as I talked about having culturally sensitive interventions, is one that really comes up as we are thinking about expanding this globally, what this may mean. We know that different cultures have different, what I would consider balances or roles and expectations for partners in relationships. So I don't know that we can actually teach people to essentially be 50-50 in their relationships, because we have to consider the cultural context. But nonetheless, we teach them about fairness, and then we teach them about problem solving. Okay, so this was the program that we're going to change. Now, in modules 2 and 3, which are these, which I would really say are like the really important parts of the program, is that we talked about teaching couples how to talk about their stressors when we bring them together. We teach them how to talk about their stressors using the funnel method. Now, I'm not going to teach you all this because we will be here for much longer than we are. Yet, what the funnel method is that I'm going to ask you a question. Or do I have a brave volunteer? Oh my gosh, hi Brenda, I remember you from the other day. Yeah, remind me your name. Sammy. Okay, Sammy, do you want to come up and hang out with me?
Yes.
Okay, that's amazing. I love that you all clapped. For some reason, I thought I was like doing a magic trick. But it's not. Okay, so how many, do all of you know Sammy? Yeah, okay, Sammy's great because Sammy volunteered. Okay, so Sammy, if I ask you, like, what's the stress that you're experiencing?
Exam.
Exam. So, it's okay. None of this counts, Professor. None of this counts. Okay, so Sam, Sammy is experiencing stress because of exams coming up. Are any of you else experiencing stress because of an exam coming up?
Of course, next week.
Okay, next week. Okay. Now think about this, because I'm going to tell you something. What the funnel method does is say, what's the stress that you're experiencing? Exams. We all can experience the same stress, but we experience it very differently. Are you ready, Sammy? And if you just want to stop, you tell me stop. Don't worry, I'm not going to do it. It's not like focus. Okay, so Sammy, what stresses you out about your exam?
Didn't have a good grade.
Not have a good grade. Okay. So the funnel is that we're starting with the stress, and we start to ask why that may be the case. Now, where we want to have Sammy get to and where we want to have the couples get to is the core emotional experience. Sammy right now is still at the cognitions, meaning I don't want to get a bad grade. So let's see if we can continue to ask Sammy questions, which is a little bit different when we're working with the couple of how we're navigating this to understand. Ready? Okay, so if you get a bad grade, what happens?
If I get a lot of bad grades, I could lose my scholarship.
Okay, so lose the scholarship. Make sense? If you lose the scholarship, what happens?
I can't be in this university anymore.
Okay, you can't be in the university anymore.
Yes.
And if you can't be in the university anymore,
I can study.
you can't study. Oh, you can't study what you like. Okay. And how do you feel if you can't study what you like?
So,
Sad. Okay, I don't want to make you sad because you're gonna pass. So if I may ask you a question, right? So then, are you good? Okay, you can still hang out with me though still, because I don't want you to be sad. We're gonna turn this positive around real quick. What I would then start to do with Sammy is that if I have partners here, is that why are you sad then? Like, what makes you sad? If you can't study what you want, you're sad because why? Now, I'm not gonna assume nor push you, but thank you. Let's give Sammy a applause. Thank you. Thank you. Because Sammy, it's, you know, it's also personal, so I don't want to be disrespectful. And then it's also thinking about, let's say Sammy said, I'm sad if I can't study what I want, because if I can't study what I want, I won't be able to potentially get a job. And if I can't get a job, then maybe, and Sammy, I'm totally making this up. If I can't get a job, then I can't make money. So what did I do from the funnel? We started to get to the emotions. We got to sadness. But then when I said I can't get a job, I'm up to the cognitions. That's why we consider it a funnel. And it's very hard for people to understand that core emotion of what they are really experiencing. And let me go back to that hypothetical example that I gave you about the kitchen cabinets. Y'all remember? Just wanted to clarify. If any of you open the cabinets, love to have a conversation with you. Just so that I can gather. Listening to some side chatter. But if you don't close the cabinets, I'm very curious about it. It's very simple. Go, roll, and then close. And then everyone in your home can be happy and stress-free. So when I did this funnel activity and I was being retrained, I actually used this example. And I said, my partner doesn't close the kitchen cabinets. Now, that's like, okay, why are you stressed about this? After going through the funnel method and essentially coming down, I'll use a personal example, is that the core schema, right, or the core idea of why this was so important to me is it's not about the cabinet, okay? It's about I've communicated something that's important to me, that if I felt as though that you cared, that would be respected, and that we would then have a mutual agreement that for whatever reason, it's important to me that the cabinets are closed. It's not about the cabinet. It's about that I've communicated something, you heard me, you understood me, etc. Okay. So for Sammy, an exam, right? For all of you may be experiencing an exam, guess what? Right? That could mean very different things for you, but what do we not communicate when we're stressed and we come home to our partners? We don't communicate about the core feelings. We communicate about the cognitions and the ideas, and we never start to understand why it matters so much. So that's what we start to teach couples. And how we do this is through 3 phases. 1, we have both partners come together, partner A and partner B. Both have to go and do the activity. But we tell the one partner, okay, can you go ahead and communicate your stress to your partner? We then kind of facilitate, as the facilitator, of course, the dialogue of how to teach couples to really get down to that point. So after that 20 minutes, and partner B is listening, and we're teaching them speaker and listener roles, we then change and have the listening partner explain, what does that mean? What did I hear you say? And also, how can I emotionally support them? That sounds really difficult. I understand this is what is stressing you out. I think I can offer this so that you can feel better. Partner A then listens to say, yes, okay, yep, I think you understood me. And partner A then reflects on the support from the partner. Okay. Now, we then switch roles, so both partners have the opportunity to practice these. Now, you may say, does this mean that I have to go home to my partner and say, okay, when are we going to schedule our stress communication activity? No, life does not happen. Nor does going through the funnel method, once you learn this, actually have to take this long. It's really an initial practice for couples to learn to how to communicate and how to actively listen, and then repeat to their partner, this is what I think I heard you say, and how can I help you understand the deeper meaning? So remember, all of this background information is that we wanted to run a study to say, can we actually teach couples these phases, decrease experiences of stress, both individually, right, just general distress, decrease experiences of stress that they're experiencing because of their identity, and increase relationship quality and well-being. That's the whole purpose. Because ultimately, for those of us that study relationship science, we recognize the importance of relationships, and we want people to have good and happy relationships. So we recruited couples in the Phoenix metro area from May 2022 to September 2023. The study ran much longer than we anticipated because, again, it was a 2-day program. Many couples and many people are busy, and so it was hard for them, of course, to come in and participate this long. But here were the criteria. At least 18 years of age, living in the Phoenix area, because they came into our our couples laboratory, wherein we in the counselor training center of our university, where we could actually run some of these sessions, in a same gendered relationship for at least 6 months, not currently seeking mental health services, because we wanted to show and demonstrate that the effects of this intervention were truly based on what it is that we were teaching and not something else that was an additive effect to therapy. And of course, both partners willing to participate. Because if both partners are willing to participate, similar to therapy, it doesn't work. We had 57 couples that actually expressed interest. This is our recruitment flyer that you can see here. And unfortunately, because of time constraints, that they said, oh, I really can't participate, or maybe this is too long for us, we ended up with the 9 couples that I had shared with you. So we had an average age of about 33. You can see we had quite an age range of couples that participated. The majority were white individuals with some formal education, meaning at least some college experience. You can see the sexual orientation identity here. 38% identified as lesbian, 27% is bisexual, 16% is gay, and the average relationship length was about close to 4 years. So what we found, remember that we tested for feasibility. Meaning, is this study or is actually teaching these couples feasible? Is this doable? Is it acceptable? Do people actually like this program? What do they like about it? What do they not like about it? And then feasibility, acceptability, and efficacy, right? Or initial effectiveness. Did it do what it was intending to do? So overall, participants said, yes, absolutely. It's feasible to have a relationship education program that you can actually teach the community. The time commitment, though, was a barrier to participation, which we knew, right? We had 57 couples expressed interest, only 9 completed the study. It was a large time commitment. So when you're thinking about designing interventions to help individuals, think about, is this actually feasible for people to do? Acceptability. Okay. The majority of the participants really enjoyed the coach communication exercise. They said it was a wonderful opportunity for us to learn how to communicate, even for couples that were together for quite a long time, as you saw. It was an opportunity for us to spend shared time together that we don't necessarily get to do. You know, although yes, it was a barrier, but they really enjoyed how it is that we can communicate, and also how can we problem solve together to potentially think about future problems that we may experience. And what you can see here are our results of preliminary evidence of effectiveness. The reason why I would interpret these results with caution is because one, of the small sample size. So we had 9 dyads, or 9 couples, 18 individuals. So while we had results in the expected directions, we were essentially underpowered in order to detect significant effects. Yet, a couple of things that I want to point out to you. Sexual minority stress at baseline. You can see that it was quite high, right? So participants in the study, right, really reported high levels of sexual minority stress. Post the intervention, much lower. Okay, although it was not significant, but we're seeing, right, trends in the expected direction, again, because of that small sample size. We saw, again, trends, and I'll point out the one true significant effect based on the sample size in just a second. But again, right, symptoms of psychological distress, depression, and anxiety decreased as a result of participating. We had stress communication, okay? Participants were like, yeah, I communicate my stress, but it was actually, right, much higher, or not much higher, but much higher if we had more people, much higher after the intervention because we taught them how to communicate about their stress. We do see, okay, we do see that we had increased reports of emotionally focused coping, meaning partners actually learned how to emotionally cope with their partner as a result of what was going on. Similar to problem-focused coping, instead of just offering that emotional support, they were actually able to then offer some problem solving that the partners felt we're on the same team. We got this. And we also saw increased reports of relationship satisfaction, which were significant based on the results. So what we found, of course, preliminary evidence. Yeah, please.
Before, please. In those results, there are only one significant two. Only two.
Correct, but
And the other is only attendance.
correct. However, bear in mind that we have only 18 individuals in the study. So that's why we say preliminary, right, evidence of effectiveness because of the incredibly small sample. Yeah, but we do have, we did collect qualitative data, so interview reports. We did interview the participants 4 weeks after the study to get, the qualitative results to understand how this impacted their relationship. All were positive, right? Positively coded, right? We've increased our communication. We feel stronger as a couple, etc. But you're absolutely correct. Yes, 2 significant effects based on the sample. So where do we go from here? Now, bear in mind that science is really a journey, right? It's not a destination, I think. And starting from the research that we did, 10 plus years ago, getting the pilot data to creating measures that were empirically sound, and then testing this intervention, where do we go from here? So here are the next steps. What I share with you here is a map of the world. Hopefully that was not a surprise to anyone. I'm more than happy to chat with you about geography. However, the map of the world represents a number of things. But first, as I've communicated and as we've talked about with our colleagues this week, is that we are good, I think we are good scientists when we are collaborative and when we take into consideration global perspectives. What you see here, the dots are a little bit off in some regard. This is supposed to be kind of ASU, but it's essentially a little bit north of Mexico. And this is where I did my training, but the yellow dots represent the collaborators with whom I am very fortunate to have worked with across my career. So in all of these contexts, it's important, I think, to recognize we as individuals hold certain identities, but we are just one element of the world. We are one element of the larger puzzle. And so my hope is that we can expand all of the work that we've done globally to think about ways in which we can increase the effectiveness of interventions, that we can increase individual well-being, which is essentially what we've been talking about all week in terms of mindfulness and engaging in mindfulness and what are the implications of that. How do we think about our lived realities? And how can we create interventions that are really culturally sound? And I say culturally sound because there is never one element that is absolutely universal. Some would argue emotions are, but truly like one intervention is universal. So in working with collaborators, one of the things that we did as an initial step to broaden this globally is we actually just published an edited volume this year in March of looking at some of these constructs across 12 different nations that were represented. That's been published by Cambridge Press, and we're looking at launching phase 2 of the project in the spring for us, which is then going to take a qualitative approach of really interviewing individuals to say, what are your relationships like? How did you form your relationships? What are the stressors that you're experiencing? What are the things that you would find helpful? Because that qualitative data will then help us to then start forming interventions that potentially can be applied. So no good science, as I mentioned to you, would be really science without many, many people and many, many supports. So of course, my colleague Casey Totenhagen, we vote him in research participants. I direct the Couples Coping with Stress Lab at Arizona State. And so all of the folks that participated are research assistants, from undergrad to graduate students. And then of course, funding made possible the Mental Research Institute and the National Council on Family Inflation. So with that, I want to share my one slide for Professor Hans that's in Spanish. I'm happy to answer any and all questions, whether it be about this work, whether it be about global opportunities, whether it be about relationships, whether it be about reality television, also my passion, which I could probably go on a lot longer for.
Tiene preguntas, también puede ser en español y les traducimos.
I would like to know something about this homework
Yes.
when you give to the partner.
Yes, so what we have is that there's actually like several worksheets that we give partners. And what we have partners do is reflect on, not only in session when they're there on Saturday and Sunday, or the days that we ran the workshops, is that we have them communicate with their partners in session about, here are my stressors, what were your stressors, here's how I communicate, here's how you communicate, and importantly, here's how I thought you communicated, and here's how I thought you communicated, and we weren't even matching on the same thing. So the homework is more so reflective and also encouraging them to practice these techniques. It's also encouraging them, we do some problem solving, and so we give them a little bit of a puzzle, so to speak, not an actual puzzle, but a written puzzle, and have them do that together and then come in and reflect. But it's always with the encouragement of continuing to practice the skills that they learned. Nothing that we like check or anything like that, but we certainly go over any questions.
Is it possible, for example, to introduce in your protocol some kind of practicing like meditation between you and your partner? Is it possible to introduce?
I love that. And here's how this is, we were talking, how does this all go in? Well, here's the first thing, is that the stress communication really occurs when we as individuals are like at our capacity for regulating our stress. So if we introduce mindfulness, even to the individual, and they're able to better regulate their stress, my hypothesis is not that they won't then communicate their stress, but they may then even be better able to communicate because they have focused, right? They have really reflected and allowed for that process time, so to speak, to then have potentially better outcomes. So that's how I see a very important link with mindfulness, especially given all of the neuroscience. Maybe not neuroscience, but definitely like the psychobiology and the interpersonal emotion dynamics of how partners are connected. That I think that would be a very, very novel application of understanding kind of the relational implication.
Is your protocol available on Spanish?
It will be after we work together to translate it. Yeah. No, but in all seriousness, I mean, that's one of the things, is that even I think we were discussing this throughout the week, but I think it's even the translation, and it was easy for us in terms of taking an initial German and an English translation, to for us as native English speakers to look at what was being essentially delivered, to then edit that in a way that was meaningful in the English language. But I think without having cultural context, like if we applied this in Peru, if we applied this here in Ecuador, of course, then I think that we absolutely need to have collaborative science to be able to not only translate, but to translate in a way that has the meaning retained. Great question. Yeah, please.
I know the sample size is a problem, but this project maybe the future has in mind to do a follow-up. I don't know, like 1 year, 5 years, or something like that.
Excellent question. So we have a small problem right now in the US with funding.
Oh.
Yeah, that's just a small problem. That some things are not being funded. Some things are, but absolutely, I think it would be a great opportunity and we would love to do that. And even thinking about, because similar, right, to engaging in mindfulness activities or any activities that we do, we can't just do things once and then say, okay, I'm good, right? I know, I'm an expert. You need booster sessions essentially. Like maybe if you accidentally, like try to make friends with the horse, then you need a booster session for tetanus shots. So everything in life needs boosters. So in that context, I think also bringing in participants to get a booster, so to speak, for the communication exercises would be great. I love this. Yeah.
Sorry.
No, please.
Is that I see your sample size mainly Caucasians. Do you know why is the reason of that?
Great question. So although we tried to really be expansive in terms of diversity, and actually the sample demographics were a little bit surprising for the Phoenix metro area, just because of how much diversity that we have in Phoenix. We didn't ask specifically for our BIPOC or our Black, Indigenous, people of color participants as to why they didn't feel comfortable potentially even engaging in the activity, but that would have been an excellent question for us. So I don't have any tangible reasons, but certainly the literature would suggest, right, that it's challenging for some to even though this was not in any way therapeutic, it was a prevention program.
Mm-hmm.
They were paid. Actually, I should have mentioned that each person was paid each couple was paid $225 US dollars to participate in a 2-day workshop.
Yeah.
That there were still, right, I think, concerns about participating, whether it be access or the ability to kind of engage in those 2 days. Great question.
So do you think maybe, like in the same line, ethnicity can impact your results? Do you have data and other papers that show that maybe based on ethnicity, mental health results, psychological intervention are different when you split the participants based on ethnicity or not?
Yeah, so we don't particularly have that research, but there's certainly research that exists, right? As I mentioned, the minority stress theory, looking at different identity samples that individuals who are people of color absolutely have increased, especially within a US context or in a context that's predominantly white, they have increased experiences of stress or higher rates of distress. And so I think that if we were to have the sample size to be able to test that, we would only be providing further evidence for those results, get further evidence as to why we need to have culturally sensitive interventions to say, what are the barriers for you seeking healthcare? How can we then mitigate that? And I know that a lot of the colleagues with whom I'm affiliated and those who I'm not affiliated with, of course, are doing work in that very important area.
And another question just like that. Do you think maybe by adding another layer such as genetics to your studies can also change this? Because it has been shown that depression, people that have depression also has specific mutations in different genes. So maybe these mutations, these people that have these mutations can impact the results of your experiment.
Love it. I don't have the answer is likely so. And absolutely, I think there's a lot of ways in which we can expand the work to even understand and likely get even at the, a cellular and molecular level to understand these experiences. And I think that even reflecting on some of the talks that we've heard this week, right, thinking about how at that level is that even impacting, our experience of consciousness and how much we think about and really embody our experiences.
Okay.
And maybe even what's then precluding for the communication. Great question. Yes. No.
I have very good presentation. So good. I love your presentation. I just wanted to say that one question.
¿Sí dices puedes decirlo en español?
No.
No, ok.
When the couple, when one part of the couple, like be, no, sí, cuando una parte de la pareja, tipo, miente.
Okay.
Ajá, miente. Entonces, esta pareja miente porque la otra pareja le hizo daño. La pareja le hizo daño. Entonces, le miente y así. Entonces, le miente porque tiene estrés.
O sea, no es sincera con la pareja porque.
No es sincera,
¿Ya?
pero la persona que tiene estrés no le avisa que tiene estrés. Entonces,
Como que cubre.
es como que no expresa que tiene estrés.
O sea, la pareja, la una tiene estrés y no puede comunicar y la otra le miente. O le miente porque no puede comunicar. No entiendo.
Dice que como que uno de los que son de la pareja está mintiendo.
En vez de decir que está estresado, dice otra cosa. No, tampoco.
Like one part of the couple is like it mean to the couple to the one to the person and the other person is like lying like
Lying because he's stressed.
like he's lying let's see.
En español.
Like, okay, so let me try to interpret. One in the standard, no, I know, because I think these are challenging constructs, right? So if I understand, I think, tell me if you're like, nope, you're way off. If one person is trying to communicate with their partner about the stress, and the other person maybe has the feelings really like repressed, right? So feeling down, and they're not able to communicate, is this kind of where I'm going with this?
I couldn't understand.
Like lying.
Like lying?
Yes.
Lying. He's trying to
Tal vez como un ejemplo.
está tratando de reprimir lo que él siente.
¿Quién es el que miente o nadie miente? No pasa nada.
Digamos, hay una pareja.
Allá.
Una pareja. Una pareja.
Ya.
La pareja.
El hombre, oye,
La mujer.
ya.
La mujer. Y dice, la mujer y dice, no, es que me siento estresada.
Ya.
Pero la persona, la
El
otra
otro.
persona le dice, le trata mal. Y entonces la otra persona
Va a estresar.
le dice, no, como que deprime lo que usted no puede,
Ah.
puede soltar.
Ok. ¿Y qué quieres preguntar?
¿Cómo?
¿Cómo manejar eso?
No. ¿Cómo la persona que está estresada no puede comunicar que está estresada si la persona que le está tratando mal no le deja expresarse?
Ah,
Eso, güey.
ok.
So it seems that the couple has some problems. One of the members of the couple, they are really stressed and it's mistreating the other person. So the person that wants to express that kind of stress is kind of repressing all of that stress because of the other person mistreating.
Okay. So, no, this is why, and this is why, right, like myself, all of us that want to study relationships, this is why we have job security. So, like, here's the thing, is that prevention programs are really reliant, and that's why we said both partners have to be willing. Because both partners really have to be willing to be honest, to be open to communicating about what's going on, so that they can then engage in this relationship. If we see any element of individual, like if there's any elements that we see as trained professionals of like personality disorders, substance use, right, any like interpersonal, violence within the relationships, we cannot move forward with this. From an ethical perspective too, right? We have to then seek and help them find the needed resources. Yet I think is that, well, I can answer that in a couple of different ways. Okay. Someone who learns about therapeutic practices, psychology, like when you look about, you can approach things individually. Oh, someone has relational concerns. How can I help you? Yet on the other side, if you're a systemic thinker, like myself, like my colleagues, you look at the relationship as a whole. You look at families as a whole. You can't separate out one person because what someone does is interconnected with someone else. So the challenge in this question is even answering from which perspective, and there's a lot of different dynamics. So I'm going to give you the answer that has happened in every graduate school. Correct me if I'm wrong, colleagues. Every graduate school class, do you know what they would tell you as the response? It depends. Yeah, that's a good graduate point. But I'm going to point out.
The person lies, lies. What if the person lies that they have one night?
They lied to me, like that thing.
That is my question.
It's very challenging, right? Because ultimately we have to go on what's being communicated to us. But that's why we also have different assessments that we can look at this. So we also give like self-reports right at the beginning and then also at the end. So we're hoping that participants are able. Challenging. And that's why I would just say to broaden this up, not necessarily us. Yet I think that that's the challenge of doing research with human subjects, meaning people that you're bringing into the lab, not from a cellular level, but from a person, a whole person level, I guess in a sense. is that any science that you read, remember that numbers are not, numbers in a sense are real, but they don't provide context. So even though I showed you these needs, some things were significant, some things were not. A numeric value, though, does not in any way shed light into like a daily human experience. We're complicated. There's a lot of things that go into our perception, and it depends. Even if I give a questionnaire to everyone right now, your response about how happy, sad, nervous, whatever that you are is dependent on this day, this time, this room, this campus, etc. Could be very different if I give you the questionnaire here, right now, versus 2 hours ago, wherever you were. Even though you were in the same campus, right? Same person. Life is complicated. That's why we do something.
Yeah.
So,
Please.
the research is about couples of the same sex.
Majority.
In this kind of couples, we don't have a problem called kids. Okay? What happens if I put in your model?
Okay, so some couples actually did have kids. And in that context, if we found, right, we are showing, with the original PhD program, we're actually looking at how you can teach couples who have children. And my colleague Dee and some of his students that he's working with is looking at, are teaching couples these communication skills effective, especially during the transition to parenthood. So when the couple is going from potentially 2 to 3, or whatever, how many kids they have, of how they can communicate about the stressors outside their relationship, even though the child is obviously part of their system.
How is your explanation why, if I have a good relationship, I feel my injury is more fast?
Ooh. Okay, this is not my line of research, but ultimately, the intersection of myself with a partner or 2 romantic partners is not only connected on the cognitive level, but we are also showing physiologically from emotional experiences, they're linked. Okay, and what we consider, and I think one of the benefits of social relationships, especially with one's partner, is the idea of co-regulation. Meaning if I'm, right, starting to go down a negative affect, what we start to see is that the other partner who may be a positive affect tries to upregulate their partner into that affected zone. So I think that physiologically we're connected as well. And I'm happy to share the papers. I don't know enough about the nuances to share that. But because of these intersections of the cognitions and the emotions, certainly there's evidence to suggest that, on the cellular level as well, there's connection.
Can I say something?
Please.
Yeah, it's very, I think it's very like plain. The thing is, if you're stressed, you have cortisol. Cortisol stops cellular replication, so you don't heal. The process is, stops.
But if you're,
Yeah,
Reduction of the stress.
yeah, it's a stress.
So actually, a person that is stressed without a couple can also have this difference in mood healing. I think.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Yeah, I have a question.
Another question.
So now this trend of polyamory, like multiple wives. So do you think it's applicable, your mother, to those couples, or kind of like
Great, okay.
communities, and how it will be impacted?
Great question. So the question was, how can potentially this work and even understanding relationships be applied for polyamorous relationships? There's very little research as ongoing with polyamorous relationships, not because they don't exist, not because they're not important, but because from a quantitative perspective, when we are looking at these models, statistically, it's quite challenging, right? I mean, social relations modeling, we can start to apply these things. Yet what we find, and when we tried to analyze this in comparison with other relationships, and one thought, like in the first study that we did that's in the edited volume, is that we asked people if you have multiple relationships, because we wanted to honor those experiences. If you have multiple relationships, can you then reflect on the person with whom you feel closest to, or the relationship that you feel most closely connected to? Now, while that solves the problem on the data analytics side, it doesn't solve the problem on the lived experience side. Because in working with colleagues now on the second phase, and we're starting to put together the code book and everything, is that we recognize we're actually ignoring people's identities. We're actually making them forced into this, essentially like a dyad, when they're not a dyad. And so it's challenging, because I think so much of what we have in relational science and the theories that we rely on, unfortunately, we see that there's obviously a lot of limited areas in terms of where science has been, especially from a relational construct, and where we need to go. So my short answer is, it's very important. It's needed research. And I would have to do a lot more thinking about how to then expand this, just to be mindful of how many different relationships are important. What are the different contexts? What are the different needs that are being met by the different relationships? But excellent, and ask the question. And if you want to do that work, let's chat. You're like, no, I'm good. I just had a question.
Become friends.
I would like to say, like, you said, like, the median time same sex relationships last is like 3 or 4 years, right?
No, that was the mean relationship for,
Same sex relationship.
that was the mean average for the couples that participated in the study, not the mean length.
No, it's not like.
No, that was the mean relationship length for those. that
And do you know how the media, like in general?
Well, what we find in the literature is actually the relationship initiation, meaning how we start relationships, the maintenance behaviors, how we continue the relationships, are essentially identical to same gender couples and heterosexual couples. Same experiences, same behaviors, but same gender couples, right, have, or, and the reason why I'm stopping on the terminology is because we don't want to conflate gender identity and sexual orientation. Aside though, is that there's these additional context stressors that are impacting the relationships that then kind of signal these on again, off again relationship patterns. And one of the things that we argue is because of the stressors that these people experience, but the relationships are the same. And I often get that question, right? Well, people who are lesbian, gay, bisexual, if they're in a relationship, their relationships are different than heterosexual couples. Well, no, they're not. They're the same.
Because I was thinking about like external stressors, right? And I was thinking if the states, the average time is 3 or 4 years. So here, I think it would be much more or less because of the conservative population that we have here.
Which, yes, and again, so no, by all means, I'm not saying that that's the average, just the average for the participants that participated in our study. Yet this is a great example, right, of context. Why context matters. Why, when we're thinking about applying this globally, right? Is this even feasible? Is it acceptable in the communities? Because we know that many lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, right, individuals are experiencing really serious threats to identity. In the volume that we did, many countries actually, like, it was illegal to engage in these behaviors. It was criminal.
In Africa.
Yeah. And we have colleagues in South Africa, and then also the colleagues that are collecting data in Nigeria, Indonesia, Malaysia. Yeah.
Because I know here it doesn't have nothing to do with like couples, but for trans people, the average, like the mortality is really high here. It's like 35 years. It's really sad.
Very sad.
So maybe even harder to get a relationship. That's it.
So, yes, please.
Sorry.
No, please don't apologize.
So I'm a part of the LGBT community.
Excellent.
Yeah. I'm bisexual, and it took me a lot of years to accept me to uh, to accept me, my family, and it's like it's a lot of problems with myself, like in my identity. And I think I I need we need to make a change to normalize to normalize the I don't know how to say it.
Because of no homophobia.
I don't know how to say it, but the normalize the identity, the identities of the people because they are normal. And because our 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 identities are normal. And not, and every identity are unique. And we are important.
Absolutely, and I could not agree with you more. And I think that it's important to not only normalize experiences, but recognize experiences and recognize the additional experiences that I may, that people like go through, right? And you were very kind and ready to share your story, and I appreciate that. And that we're all, at the end of the day, we're all human beings. We all experience life. We experience different things differently. We all just want to be accepted and belong. And so that's kind of where I think science can go from a social science perspective. And I would be happy to chat with you more about how we can do the collective work for your communities.
No questions? No?
Maybe last question? No?
Thank you very much.
No, I think gracias.
Gracias, chicos.
Have an email.